Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, owner of Fearless Financial Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us here today on Fearless Females. I'm so excited to have all those loyal listeners. I really appreciate it. I really try really hard to make sure that these women's voices are heard. And I appreciate all of you who listen to this and hear those stories. It just makes a difference. I think it does make a difference. So today we're speaking with Saly, and I'm going to get a little bit real with you today, a little bit deep in this introduction. Saly is a victim's advocate, and I had the experience several years ago where my son was involved in a school shooting. He actually helped two other boys in the classroom tackle and subdue a shooter. And the next year and a half of our lives, 2 years of our lives, was interspersed with court cases and hearings and some counseling and just a lot of things that revolved around making sure that my son and my family were healthy and taken care of after this traumatic experience in his life. It really struck me that it wasn't just Josh thing. This affected our entire family, and it affected our community, and it affected our lives for years to come. Probably the reason that this is so close today is as I'm recording this introduction, we're coming up on an anniversary of that day, and it always strikes me. But the reason that Saly kind of has a special place in my heart is we were assigned a victim's advocate after the shooting, and that wonderful lady just led us through this whole experience in a way that helped us to understand and helped me to get the help that I needed for my family, both counseling, and she would call and make sure that we were okay. She would just guide us through this whole process throughout these several years as we were dealing with these unknowns and situations that we were not prepared for. And that is what Saly does. And so in my heart, she has a special place in this profession that she so exemplifies. Is just really important to me personally. But she also has a really great story. And there's a moment in this conversation that just sort of made me think. She said, shrinking doesn't make anyone more comfortable. It just makes me less effective. And knowing how important her job is, what she actually does for those victims, how she shows up for them, she says, I need to be bold. I need to be out there. I need to advocate for the victims that I am taking care of. She's like, I don't have time to be small, sometimes to soften or step back. She's like, because they need my help. And it just started me thinking, I wonder if we all felt that way about our job, if we would be able to speak out a little bit louder and show up a little bit more, not shrink as much, because we knew that we were taking care of these people who really needed us. And so we didn't have time to be timid or shy. We needed to be bold to help them. And I think that, you can put this sense of like, I need to stand out because I am advocating for the most important thing. My clients, their lives, their futures. I'm in charge of that. And it really does go over all sorts of different professions, I wonder if we thought of ourselves in that light, if maybe we would be a little bit bolder. I know you're going to love this interview with Saly, and I know that she's just going to strike you like she did me, where she is sure of her place at the table and wants you to be sure of yours. So let's get started. Good morning, Fearless Females. So today we have Saly Fayez. She is the Director of Victim Services, and I had a chance to just chat with Saly a little bit, and I'm so excited about your interview. I really think this is going to be neat. Thank you for giving us the time, Saly.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited. And sorry, I know I've postponed it a few times, so thanks for bearing with me.
We're just excited to listen to your story. So thanks. My very first question is always the same. I love books. I am a voracious reader. What is your favorite book?
So I have two, which kind of falls in line with what I do. Catcher in the Rye is one of them, and then To Kill a Mockingbird is another one of my favorites. And I actually just recently, and those I read back in, I think high school and college, but I just recently purchased Catcher in the Rye again. It's sitting on my nightstand, which is funny you asked the question, and I'm waiting to read it again.
I know. I have a whole stack of books on my nightstand. In fact, I just had to put new bookcases in my house because...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I had too many books, and I'm like, where else can we stash some books in this house?
Yeah, I have them like in my nightstand, in my everywhere else. I have a guest bedroom that's probably not the guest bedroom anymore. It's like my hoarding room. So there's some books in there, but I'm excited to read it again. I just, there's certain books that just resonate with you and you remember them, and those were two of the ones that I remember the most.
Yeah, I think I read To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, I've read it through the years, but I think I read it first when I was back in grade school or something. Not grade school, maybe middle school.
Yeah.
But it just really, that story sticks with you, doesn't it? It just doesn't leave. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your journey, Saly. How did you get where you're at today? Did you know your path? You went straight there, or was it a little bit curvy? Tell me about how you got here and what you do.
So I thought I knew my path until I went to get my master's degree. And so I was actually voluntold to be in this career, literally voluntold. So I was in grad school at the University of Pittsburgh, and all of my work prior to that had been working with juvenile offenders. And that's where all my experience was. The little few months between undergrad and going to grad school, I had worked in a juvenile offending home, and I was hoping to do my internship. And so when you get your master's of social work, you have to do a year internship. And so I was all prepared to do my internship, working either at the public defender's office or something with juvenile offenders. And so my advisor told me that I needed to see how the other half lives. And so she told me, or voluntold me, that I'm going to be working at the Center for Victims of Violent Crime. And so not only was I going to be working at the Center for Victims of Violent Crime, but I was going to be working with victims of juvenile offenders. So the exact opposite of what I wanted to do. So I didn't choose it. My journey kind of chose me, and it changed everything. It changed the trajectory of my career. 25 years I've been working with victims of violent crime. So, when people ask me, and I take on interns here, and I tell them about my own experience with my internship, and I say, the internship didn't just change my career path, it kind of changed how I understood the criminal justice system and justice entirely. Mm-hmm. And I never looked back, which is kind of why I go back to the two books, because both of those books, especially To Kill a Mockingbird, is about an unjust system. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I had just spent so much time figuring out and understanding offenders that I just didn't even think about the other side. And so, like I said, I didn't choose it, it chose me, but I wouldn't do anything else.
Yeah, and I guess you probably wouldn't have stuck with it if it didn't speak to you, right?
No, not at all. And I even kind of had my little graduate school attitude. I was like, that's fine, but I'm just going to go back to working with juvenile offenders. And I remember my supervisor at my internship, I still keep in touch with her. And she told me I'll never go back. And I challenged her and I said, I'll go back when this is over. And they actually ended up hiring me after I graduated. And then the Center for Victims of Violent Crime hired me. I worked in their prevention education department. And then crazy enough, I then became the supervisor over the juvenile court unit. Oh, wow. So, yeah.
It was just meant to be. You just had to find your way there. So,
yes.
Voluntold to find your way there, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a voluntold, but I wouldn't have done it any other way. So I'm grateful to those people.
So as you kind of think along your journey, What is the best? Is there a really good investment you've made in yourself? Something that you've done that you're like, oh my goodness, I just would not be as successful as I am today if I hadn't done that thing?
I think for me, it was learning how to be a leader, learning what the definition of leader really meant. I was supervisor in Pittsburgh. I've been a supervisor here in Fairfax County for 16 years now. And so I had to learn to lead people, not just manage them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an investment in myself, even though people sometimes question, like, how is that an investment in yourself? Because it allowed me to then grow other people when I started investing in my team. So to me, that was really, really valuable. I was once told I was too emotionally invested to be effective. I had to decide right then who I was going to be, and I chose not to change that for anybody.
I love that. So you said lead, not just manage. Tell me
Yes.
what the difference is there.
You always say there's a difference between a leader and a boss, right? A leader is, for me personally, where I lead with empathy, I lead with purpose. That's not necessarily everyone's style. Some people want to be a boss, directing people what to do, telling them what to do, but not explaining why you're asking them to do things, not leading by example. I've never asked my people to do something that I myself haven't done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to not lead for approval, not lead for the title, to lead with purpose. And like I said, I don't think that's for everyone, and I'm okay with that. I do believe that my impact is measured by the people that I develop, not the fact that I'm called a director. And an example of that is, one of my employees that worked for me for almost 10 years recently left to go become a director of her own victim services unit at a newly created department division. And so to me, when I retire here, I know that will continue with other people.
And what made you so passionate about that? There must have been a spot where you're like, this idea of growing people and leaving a legacy is one of the most important things to me. Like when did that happen?
I don't know if I can tell you when. I think it's the work that we do. We work with people at the worst time of their life. We meet people. I always say we meet the best people at the worst time of their life, and they let us in. And I think that's an honor for them to let us in. And so for me, I want to carry that on. I can retire in a few years, but I don't want this to end with me. I've been with this department. I'm in my 23rd year. So I've been doing victim services for 25 years, maybe 26. And I wanted to continue because it doesn't end here. It just keeps getting better. And so when I leave, I want to know that I've left a group of people that can carry what I've started on and continue it.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the idea of investing in that too. Like there are a lot of, it's really hard. Usually when you become a manager, what happens is you're good at what you do. And so they promote you. And now you're in charge of people doing what you do. And a lot of times you don't get any training, you don't get any direction. And some people aren't good at it.
Am I perfect? Absolutely not. If you ask the 20 people that I do lead, they may tell you some different things. But I think what they will tell you is they know I care about them. I care about their future. And I've always said to people, I said, if you leave here to make yourself better and to go somewhere that's going to continue your path, whether it's in victim services or something else, then I've done my job. I've never discouraged anyone to look for another job. The devotion shouldn't be to me. It should be devoted to their passion and what they want to do. And so that's really, really important to me. And even, the work we do is advocacy, but every single person has a different strength. Every single person that I supervise has a different way of doing things, a different way of wanting to do things. Some love public speaking, some love doing grant writing, and that's their opportunity to come tell me, like, I want to do something on top of what our normal job is, and I encourage that.
I love that. I did a similar deep dive into leadership and leadership principles and kind of trying to see how to develop people that could take those skills and move forward with them. And I love that you're passionate about that because it makes a difference to the legacy that you leave behind,
I agree.
Yeah.
I hope so, but I agree.
What is the worst advice you've ever been given? Have you ever had some really bad advice? And I'm always interested in whether you took the advice or whether you didn't.
I would say, to me, I think the worst I've got was sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, was to shrink, was to soften my voice, make myself more comfortable for other people. And I did do that for a while. And then what I ended up learning is that shrinking doesn't necessarily make anyone more comfortable. It just makes me less effective. And I just believe, again, in the work that we do, the victims and survivors that we work with, they deserve my entire voice, not to shrink, because I'm an advocate first and foremost. I've been an advocate. Even once I became the director, I'm still an advocate. And I'm advocating not only for victims, but I'm advocating for my staff. And I was also told two things I did. So that I did for a little bit, and then I learned, let's not do that. But I was also told to lower my expectations when I became a director. And I remember somebody telling me that, I assume that things should be up here, but because that's how I work. But not everybody's going to work that bar that you have. So lower your expectations and keep my emotional distance. But I rejected both of those. I just, I don't think excellence is necessarily unkind, and I don't think empathy is weakness. I think there are strengths in this work, to be both. So for me, not having the expectations of my unit that I would have of myself is not something that I believe would make me an effective leader, because I felt that if I could do the work, then they could do the work too. So I do raise my expectations. I have high expectations for the people that I hire, because I want them to have those expectations for themselves.
I found too that a lot of times they live up to those expectations. If you expect a lot out of people and you have really high standards, they don't want to disappoint you, especially if they know that you truly care about them and their journey and their life and their work and their purpose. And so they don't want to disappoint. And so they'll put forward the extra effort, which in turn makes them better people too.
100%. And the age range is funny, because the age range with my folks is anywhere between like 23 and then those of us that have been here so long, like in our 50s. And so it's even generational differences. But, my other job is anyone that comes into this field is going to have insecurities. I had insecurities about, am I doing the right thing? Am I helping? And so to raise their expectations is to raise their confidence, and it's to get them prepared to do this work and to continue to do this work, because the burnout rate is so high.
Oh, I can imagine.
And you have to have the ability to be resilient. And that to me is also part of higher expectations of, if you want to do this work, and some people have done it and decided they don't want to do this and they've left. And I've supported that as well, because on paper, it looks like a cool job, right? You're working for the police department, you're working with victims. Everyone thinks you're Olivia Benson on SVU. But the reality is it's a really tough job. And there have been people that have come and gone, and there have been people that have stayed. And so it's to build that confidence to say, I want to do this work, and I want to be better and better at it every day.
Mm-hmm. Is there something specific you use to help build that confidence, or is there steps you take, or is it just organic?
Definitely not organic. I think, again, it's having those conversations. It's understanding that every single person that works for me comes in with different life experiences, different expectations of themselves, different confidences, different anxieties. And I have to make sure that I'm looking at them as individuals and not having that groupthink mentality that all of them are the same. Because I think everyone learns a different way in how I approach them. And I've had to learn that I made my mistakes, or I had to remember, we were just talking in a meeting earlier today with, again, the younger folks, of things that I have said in a text message that they have read wrong because of the tone, or because of, things that I never, like, I don't know if you knew this, but if I put a period after a sentence in a text, they think I'm mad at them. And I just laughed, and I'm like, that's just called punctuation. Like, that's what I learned in English class. Or if I write okay instead of K, then I must be mad at them. I mean, things that I never even would imagine was an issue, but people told me, like, they would go home upset. And part of me wanted to say, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Get over it. But then I had to remember and go, but this is what they're telling you. So embrace that and respect it. And and it still pains me. So I'm always going to put a period after my sentence. I just can't do it. But I've had to learn to say things like, hey, are you here? Can you come meet with me? And there's certain people I actually have to say, you're not in trouble. Because I think getting something from your boss, they automatically think they're in trouble. And so I just have to be keen on that. And I've tried. I make mistakes still, but I've tried.
Yeah. So do you do like regular, like, how do you understand them at such a deep level and such a individual level? Do you have coaching with them, or do you hang out together, have like structured hangout time? How do you do it?
Yes, a little bit of everything. So what I do, quarterly, I will have individual meetings. Again, it's 20 of them. They're in court so much. Like, we don't have the type of unit that I can do once a week. Let's do check-ins with everybody, because you would just be sitting in meetings all day long. But when I have my quarterly check-ins with them, I actually give them homework to do. And there's certain things that I ask them to come to me with. And every single time it's different. Or one quarter, I delved into Brene Brown and took some of her stuff off of her website.
Mm-hmm.
I've had them. There was that Netflix series that I had them watch, the Courage, and then we got on. That was during COVID. And we got on Zoom and we talked about it. And just today we did the Strengths Finder, where we had somebody come in and they had already taken the test to talk about their strengths and what their strengths are, and just conversations. And when it's time to do their annual evaluations, again, it's letting them come to me and telling me what they felt that they've worked on this year. And when you have those conversations with your staff individually, you get to know them in a different way. Mm-hmm. And then you get to know them when you're doing team meetings. So we have staff meetings once a week, and we do roundtable, and I have them bring a case to the table of like how it's going and things like that. But you see and learn personalities that way as well. You see how people respond to things. And we also have direct conversations. I'm just a firm believer that women can get along. And I think a lot of people's relationships are based on how their leaders perceive them. And so if I don't have that expectation of them, that they can work together and they can be a team, do they have to like each other every day? Absolutely not. But do they need to respect each other for the work we do? Yes. And so, yes, your resume is important. Yes, how many years you've done this or not done this is important, but it's also how do you get along with a team? Mm-hmm. And so that to me is even more important, because if you're not willing to put aside the toxicness that can happen sometimes, then what you're doing is you're causing an entire group of people to not be able to work together. And it only takes one person. It takes one person to ruin an entirely good group of people. And they know that about me. They know that I don't put up with that, because the work's too hard, and we should embrace each other and lift people up.
Mm-hmm. And too important too. What you do is really important.
Definitely. And I've said that too. I've said, if you all have time to not get along with each other, then you're not busy. And people have learned, when a lot of people, when they first started working here and working for me, they were single, not married, no children. And they kind of never maybe understood why I said it was so important, because some of the parents saw how important that was. Because when you become a parent and your child is sick, you're leaning on your team to cover your cases and do things like that. And so now all these people are now married with children, and they're seeing that. Mm-hmm. And, I'm not married. I don't have children, but I saw it within my own sister and what she needed. And so to respect and work well with one another, then you have the comfort to text a group and say, hey, so-and-so's sick. Can someone cover this case for me? Mm-hmm. And that's teamwork, and that's being adhesive and working together.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's neat. What about do-overs? Is there a situation that you kind of look back on now and you're like, oh gosh, you don't necessarily have to regret it, but is there a situation you can think of that you're like, I would totally do that differently if I could do it again, knowing what I know now?
Knowing what I know now, I would say being loyal to the wrong people. Tough lesson to learn, but I learned it maybe too late in the game with, kind of further into my career, but definitely loyalty to the wrong people.
And what does that look like? Or how would you have handled the situation a little differently?
For me personally, I value loyalty. And I think working in an environment like this, I learned not everyone in the workplace necessarily operates that way.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will take what you give them and then they won't have your back in return. And I say that carefully because loyalty, again, is one of my core values. But I learned the hard way that they're not going to have your back. Some people are going to smile in your face and undermine you the moment you turn around. Some will take what you give, your time, your trust, your energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a painful lesson, especially when, for me, I lead with my whole heart. But what I learned is to pay attention to who shows up in the difficult moments, right? Not just the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that tells you everything. Pay attention to who shows up when it's hard, because that's your circle.
Mm-hmm.
And protecting your energy and your integrity isn't selfish. And so because this is such an empathetic career choice, you always try to give everybody the credit of, the benefit of the doubt, but that can also hurt you when you do that. And so that's kind of what I wish I had learned early on in my career, that being professional doesn't necessarily always mean you have to be loyal, because you can get burned. And it's a lesson, and it's a hard lesson, but it's a lesson that not only have I learned, but it's a good lesson, if that makes sense, because my circle is very small now in the workplace. When you are, and I tell people this all the time, when you are 25 and in your career, I think you value what a work friend is differently than when you're where I'm at now at 51.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning, you want camaraderie. You want people to go out with, grab drinks with, maybe complain about work a little bit, someone to get through the day. Nowadays it's send memes to or TikTok videos. But as you get older, and for me, as you've seen the things that we've seen, we sit and work homicide cases and sexual assault cases, really tough cases. And to me, you realize you want something deeper in the workplace, both professionally and personally. You want people who are going to be honest with you, even when it's really uncomfortable to hear.
Mm-hmm.
People that have your back, like I said earlier, when you're not in the room. And, I read a quote, and I always read quotes all the time. I'm a big quote person, but it's, stick with people that defend you when you're not in the room. And I think that that's huge, because people who are generally rooting for you are the most important people to keep you sane and keep you grounded.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's a really valid and important point to stick with people who defend you even when you're not there. I've heard a question asked before, I can't remember on what, but something about, what do you want people to say about you when you're not in the room? Like, what do you want them to talk? And it's an interesting question of how you want to be perceived when you're not there.
It is, and again, personally, I know this, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. But I think the people that are in my life, that have stayed in my life, are people that know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And they generally believe that I come from a good place. And that's what I want, and what I now know is, for me personally in this career, if you're doing what you generally believe is right, I just feel that's enough. And not every opinion about that deserves my energy at this point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was just thinking about, well, how do you decide like where to put your energy? Is it after you've been burned that you figure out that, hey, that's not where I want to put my loyalty or energy? Or how do you do that?
I mean, I think it depends on the individual. For me personally, I think you forget, and I'm guilty of that too. Like, I'm guilty of saying, be careful who I'm loyal to, and then I'll make the mistake again, right?
Yeah.
And I'll be loyal to somebody else I probably shouldn't. But I do believe it. I don't know. And I don't know how old you are, but like for me, I'm 51, and there's something truly, truly sincere when people say, like, once you're in your 50s, the game changes, as far as I truly am okay that there are people I know don't have my back, and I'm okay being careful with people now. Mm-hmm. And I think that, unfortunately or fortunately, I have learned that the majority of people don't have your back. And I'm not talking about personally. I'm talking about in a professional manner. And so when you do find those people that do, hold on tight. Like, hold on tight, because like for me, I've always valued it. I got it from my parents, maybe I'm loyal too much to people, because when you're in my life, I'm going to fight for you no matter if you're in the room or not.
Uh-huh.
But I'm pretty sure even at 51, I will make this mistake again, but I think I will make it less than I have in the past.
That makes sense. So just as you get used to it and you see the signs, you're better and better at putting more of your energy to those places and people that return that.
Yes. 100%.
Loyalty and okay, I like that. I think that's an interesting way of looking at things, and it feels authentic to me. So what about if you could go back and high five yourself for one great past financial decision? What would that be?
Staying here. And I'll say why. And I know that's not a normal answer to the question, but, again, being here for 23 years, I'm in law enforcement, right? And so there were definitely times I wanted to leave. The work was stressful, the burnout, the frustration. There's times where I have felt undervalued. And when walking away at the time just felt like the only sane option. I think that we all are lying to ourselves in any career, unless it's just the most perfect job ever, that you didn't have those kind of days or those kind of moments. But I didn't leave. And, there were times where I looked for other jobs. I applied, I interviewed for other jobs. But knowing that I have stayed here through the hard seasons, through the doubt, through finding out people aren't necessarily loyal is something that I am genuinely proud of because, 25 years in public service, 23 here, means a retirement package that's going to reward the longevity of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And so that to me is what's most important, the longevity and the financial piece that I know that I can retire knowing that I stayed the long haul. And that to me is the best financial decision I could have made because it would have been easy for me just to leave. It wasn't, I was offered positions, but then I had to sit back and say, take your anger, take your frustration, take your stress out of it. And what staying here really gave me was just the chance to see that that things do work out,
mm-hmm.
and the chance to continue to see that I can build something that has lasted and hopefully will continue to last. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I left here or left anywhere every time that it got hard. So that discipline for me, choosing the long game over like the easy exit from here has, has a compounding value. You can't build anything meaningful if you leave every time it gets hard.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that probably flows through to other areas of your life too, relationships and career, obviously, but like that there are other places where you can take that same value and say, finance for one. Am I sticking with it even though it's hard during these lean years where we've got kids that need braces and also that sort of thing? Like, are we still sticking with our plan? So
trust me, I look at Instagram and I see people that are like, I gave up my such and such job and now I live in Mexico, and I'm like, God, I wish. but in order for me to afford to do that, I have to finish what I started.
Yeah, I like
because I also feel that not only was that a financially secure decision for me, but I also think it's also allowed me to see, the statement we hear all the time: what doesn't kill you does make you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so the battle wounds, all of that, to me means that I'm a strong female and
mm-hmm.
that I can survive it and other people can too.
And passing that along to that strength as you've reached this latter half of your career where you can pass and develop and grow that in someone else, that resilience and that stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah.
What scared you the most when you started your career? And does it still?
I would say, early on, it was probably the fear of not being enough. You're sitting with these people on the worst days of their life and you can't fix it. I mean, that's a hard reality. You feel like everyone always feels like they have to fix something and you have to say something and that it's okay just to sit there and listen. I don't have to have a solution to everything, so I'm not there necessarily to fix it. I learned that I was there to witness it. I was there to be a steady presence for them. And sometimes that is just what they need is an ear, is a person just sitting next to them and saying nothing. And of course, there's been hard seasons in this career where, like I said in the earlier question, I wanted to give up, feeling unseen, where I questioned it, things like that. But, and I think it's a disservice to pretend that they aren't, but resilience to me isn't the absence of those feelings. It's what you do with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me now, fear looks different. Fear now for me isn't necessarily of being enough. It's the fear now is 23 years later. It's the weight of my responsibility at a systems level, if that makes sense. Making sure that what I have continued to build actually works and actually is sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that's a healthy evolution for me from when I first started.
It's so interesting to me because I interview a lot of different women over a lot of different professions. And sometimes, I get answers that are like, well, it's not life and death, like you just got to let it go and it's not life and death. But there are other professions where it actually, you are dealing with things that are life and death, that are really weighty and really heavy and really important. And like we wouldn't even, and you deal with these situations over and over and over again. It's not just like one life or death situation. It's like it's several. And I think that it is really important to acknowledge is that you do deal with problems that truly change people's lives in ways, good or bad ways, depending. And that can be a heavy burden to hold.
It can, and I even tell my folks this. I mean, you worry that if I didn't make that phone call to a domestic violence, a victim of domestic violence at the right time, did that cause something else to happen? I mean, you think that way, right? Like, although we tell our own victims that what someone did to you isn't your fault, but you have such a responsibility. We have such a responsibility on us, and everyone that is in this career, whether it's here in this department or anywhere across the nation, to be in the field of crime victim advocacy, it's not for the weak. And you constantly worry, especially people that have been in your caseload for years. You worry about them and you want to make sure they're okay. But, part of that too is, your victims have a right to self-determination. You can give them the information, you can give them the resources, but if they choose, domestic violence victims, if they choose to go back to their abuser because of other reasons, right? It's not easy to leave an abusive situation. No. And we're not there to judge it. We're there to say, I hope that never happens again. But if it does, we're going to be there for you because I'm not dealing with the financial burden of it. I'm not dealing with the immigration issue of it. I'm not dealing with the guilt, the fear, the pets at home, the children at home, any of that. I'm not dealing with if my abuser leaves, then I have no groceries on the table for my children. Yeah. And so our job is to say, I can't save people, but I can give them all the tools necessarily and all the help necessary to hopefully get them out of that situation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really important distinction, I think, and a really important piece of what you do to remember that you carry heavy burdens and that you can't change other people's free will, and you wouldn't want to.
No, no, of course not. Absolutely.
But it's hard to live with the consequences of that sometimes.
Yes.
What about any unique challenges as you went through your career because you were a woman? Did you face any of those?
No. Absolutely. I mean, I'm in a male-dominated space. Law enforcement is a male-dominated space, and people roll their eyes at this, but it's the reality that women are often interpreted differently. Passion gets labeled as emotional, confidence gets labeled as difficult, directness gets labeled as aggressive, and I see this a lot, that confidence in a man is respected, but sometimes in a woman it's questioned. And what I've told myself is you show up anyway. I'm a subject matter expert in my field, but even now till today, I walk into rooms where I'm not always wanted. And that's where your confidence has to show up. When you know your mission in your work, when you know it, you don't just deserve, like I truly believe I don't just deserve a seat at that table. I should be leading a lot of those conversations. And so I stopped asking for permission a long time ago. And I think that's just worth naming it. I think it's worth being honest about it. And after 25 years in this field, like I said, of course you want to hope and think that people look at me and say, and respect me for who I am. But I said this earlier too. I'm not everyone's cup of tea. There's people that don't want me at the table. One, maybe because they don't want to hear what I have to say. Or I think also, women in leadership positions, we have to navigate assumptions that some of the men don't have to face. And so, but I'll say this again, because this is what I've learned. And again, it wasn't learned overnight. Trust me. Your confidence has to show up for you. And I've made peace with that. And when you know your mission and you know your people, you just should be the one leading the conversation. And so I just stopped apologizing for how I lead, and my gender shouldn't play a role in anything as far as the respect that I feel that I deserve.
Mm-hmm. Is there any particular way that you kind of show that confidence, or is it just you've stopped apologizing for it now?
Stopped apologizing for it, because I think 23 years somewhere, anywhere, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're working at a hospital, doesn't matter, you're a teacher, whatever you do, you kind of earned it. You've earned the confidence. And so I've just stopped apologizing for it, because at the end of my day, I go home and in the car, I'll ask myself, did I show up for the people that I'm supposed to show up for? And the people that I'm supposed to show up for are our victims, our survivors, our family members, and my team. Mm-hmm. And my team expands far beyond just the victim services. For me, my team also expands into detectives, because while I may not supervise them directly, for us to make trainings and bring trainings for detectives, that ultimately is helping our victims. So I've just learned, and I walk in, and maybe I walk in with a power suit and my hair up in a bun. I don't know, maybe that's how I deal with it. But I stopped apologizing. I stopped explaining myself, and I know my worth, I guess, is what I've learned. And I'm proud of that. And it's taken years, trust me. This isn't like, oh, I woke up this way. It's taken years. It's taken blood, sweat, and tears. It's taken people that have, and women face this a lot, right? Like people talking or gossiping or making up things about you, because how could she have gotten where she is if this didn't happen? But that's all noise. And so someone told me a long time ago, one of my best friends from college, and I'll never forget this, and we were in college, and it was probably I know this sounds really weird, but I think it was the first time that I think someone didn't like me just for me. I didn't even really know the person, and that bothered me. And I'm like, well, I didn't do anything to her. And I'll never forget, my friend who I'm still friends with till this day was like, Sally, sometimes people just aren't going to like you. You didn't necessarily do anything to them. They're just not going to like you. And I had to just say, you're right. There are times where people are going to think differently or think the worst, and I can't do anything for you. When it comes to that, other than just continue to be who I am.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I still am learning that lesson. I feel like I'm a nice person. People should like me, but you're right. There are people out there that I'm not their cup of tea. Oh. That's just the way it is. And I have to make peace with that. I'm getting better at it. It's hard.
And I've also learned, a lot of times people's issues with me are actually issues within themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge thing to remember. And, the same friend also told me, and this is how she looks at things, because she's probably one of the most confident people I know. She said, what did she say to me? She said, if you should be flattered if people are talking about you behind your back. And I go, how is that flattery? And she goes, because you're not thinking about them. So for them to for you to take up space in their head where they're talking about you, you should be flattered. And I go, and so I'm like, okay, so sometimes I try to channel her energy into my brain.
Yeah, that way. She sounds like a smart friend.
Oh yeah. One of the most for sure.
Saly, what are you the most proud of as you look back over your journey?
I'm proud of my team. So I'm proud of the people and the culture that I've built here. I've watched advocates come in really unsure of themselves, when they first start out, and they've grown into such strong, confident leaders. And honestly, there's nothing more rewarding than that. Like I said, I had someone that worked with me and for me, and she started off as an intern. I didn't even think that I was going to hire her when she put in for the position, and she blew it away, the interview, and I hired her. And 10 years later, she's now the new me, right? Like she's now somewhere else starting her own team.
Mm-hmm.
And so all those difficult chapters that tested me personally and professionally clarified who I am and what's important to me. And so I believe on top of that, what I'm most proud of as a result of all of that is I chose courage over comfort. Like Brene Brown says, I chose courage over comfort, not perfectly, trust me, but consistently. And I have led and continue to lead in a way that is authentically mine. And not everyone agrees with how I lead, and that's okay, because I don't think this mission working with crime victims is necessarily, people don't care about the consensus of it all. What matters is that we're showing up and my team is showing up, and that's what we do every single day. And so I would say the people and the culture, without a question.
I love that. I think that it shows a lot about a person when the thing that they're most proud of is their contribution to like someone else, helping somebody else rise. You know what I'm saying? Like their team.
I do because because in this field and other fields, leadership isn't about title or tenure. I believe, like you just said, it's about whether the people around me are growing, whether our victims and survivors are being served, and whether my work outlasts me. And so that to me is truly, I don't think there's anything more rewarding than that, is to see that growth and to see watching people that came in doubting themselves, find their footing, develop their own voice, and to go on and continue to just become great at what they do.
So any advice, Saly, for a young lady who's kind of just starting down this path that you were put on so many years ago and you're so successful at now? Any advice to help her be successful like you?
I have lots of advice, but I will keep it to a minimum. The first thing I would say is don't shrink to fit a mold that wasn't built for you. You you don't need permission to take up space that you've earned. The work that you decide to do, whatever it is, it needs you. It needs your full voice, your instincts, your perspective, your smarts. And mentorship is huge. Find mentors who will tell you the truth, especially on the hard days. I don't want to hear all the good stuff all the time. I want the constructive criticism and take constructive criticism. When you get constructive criticism, you can even you either take away from that it was constructive or that it was criticism, and take it as you're being told something to try to make you better at what you do. I say this because this is my thing all the time, and I've said this probably 17 times in this podcast alone, but you will never be everyone's cup of tea. I don't think that's a flaw. I think it's a sign that you're leading with conviction. And my last thing would probably, two things. I would say protect your energy and be intentional of like who you are and who you invest in. And the last thing is don't seek revenge on things. I've learned that rotten fruit, someone told me this the other day, rotten fruits fall on its own. So you continue to be who you are and let the other stuff go where it may.
Yeah, I like that. It takes way too much energy to hold grudges and fight and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you, Saly, so much for your insight and for just the time that you've spent with us. I really appreciate it. If I have a young lady who wants to pick your brain or ask some questions, how does she get in touch with you?
Email me. My first name, SALY, period, or dot, and Fayez, FAYEZ, at Fairfax County, spelled out, .gov.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really have appreciated this, and I've learned a lot.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I love what you're doing, so thank you.